What's up? This is Richie from the Where We Wild YouTube channel, and today I got a SHIMANO VANFORD C3000XG. Very cool reel, man. Just got it for Christmas, actually. Pretty stoked up. And I just wanted to take it all apart, tune it up, add my usual assortment of oil and grease, get it running nice and smooth and ready for battle. So if you're at home trying to take yours apart, you can follow along and hopefully it'll help you out. Let's get into it. All right, so the SHIMANO VANFORD C3000XG, pretty sick, dude. This thing is so light, 6.3 ounces, that blows my mind. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, on paper, this thing looks like probably the most complicated spinning reel I've ever taken apart. So there's a lot of little parts in there. There's a lot of different tools that you're gonna need. Usually it's just flathead, Phillips head, maybe a wrench, but this thing's got some crazy stuff on it. You're gonna need maybe a torque attachment, Allen, and then your Phillips and your flathead and your wrench. So I suggest having one of these nice little toolkits here, precision screwdriver toolkit. I'll link it in the description along with everything else I'm using, this mat, all the oil and grease. I got a bearing tester, all that stuff, man. So if you don't have that type of stuff, you can go and get it, and it'll really help you work on these reels. All right, let's go for it, kids. This should be interesting. The SHIMANO VANFORD, we're gonna start out by taking off this spool, loosening up the drag. Now I think there's a little bit of a seal on this thing which may make it difficult to pull this thing out. It's kind of like a little plunger effect, a little rubber piece. Yeah, it's stuck in there a little bit. You can see that little rubber piece that they have there, and it just kind of meant to keep water out, I suppose. All right. Got some tweezers here. Actually, might just use a little bit of a screwdriver for this. Now we have a little bit of a little spring clip in there, and we're gonna have to pry that out. You can use tweezers or flathead. Get this out of my way. Now, it's solid on three sides of this, and then you're gonna see a little break in it on one side. So you just wanna find that break, start there, keep your finger over it, and then just start working your way around it and pry it up. Just like that. And keeping your finger over it like that really prevents it from flying up and hitting you in the face. So it's got a little bit of a bend in it. All right, next up in here, let's see what we got. Now I'm gonna take my time here. This thing's a little too big. And be careful not to take things apart too quickly, and I suggest you do the same. That way you can remember the order of everything. And we're just gonna work our way down. So first we got this little metal piece here. I'm just gonna work my way this way as we take stuff out. Looks like a drag washer. We got another little metal washer that has a little bit of a keyed aspect to it. We got another drag washer and what looks like a little plastic piece that it sits on. Just working down, working down, working down. And then one more drag washer. Carbon fiber drag washer, that's cool. All right, so 3 drag washers and then some other little things in here. So if you have some dirty grease left over in there, you can grab a Q-tip, clean that out. Just be careful that your Q-tip isn't leaving behind any cotton fibers. So just kind of spin it, keep it tight to the Q-tip, almost like cotton candy. You're making cotton candy, if that makes sense. Try to keep all that stuff out of there. Let's give it a little wipe out. I also have one of these little air blowers that comes in handy a lot for stuff like that. Those little fibers, man, you can see them. You don't want that down in there, so make sure you get all of them out. Make sure it's nice and clean. Very tiny, you're never gonna be able to see that, but it's there. All right, let's hook up these drag washers real fast. We're gonna use our Cal's universal reel and star drag grease. And we're just gonna put a really light coating on these washers. Super light coating. You don't want to see any buildup on there, just super, super light and clean. You're just using this to add more life to your drag washers. If they're bone dry, the drag's going to be as strong as it can be. You're going to get max drag, but the washers are going to burn up quicker on you over time. So just adding a little bit of this drag grease kind of keeps them a little lubricated and keeps them from ripping apart on you. Just going to wipe off any excess. Like I said, you just want a nice shine to them, you know what I mean? You might see some carbon fiber wipe off on your fingers. You can see it there maybe on the camera. And you just get that off on a paper towel. Excuse me. I need a little bit of water here. Nice clean coating. Sticky. See, that's the difference here with this grease and say the pen reel grease, for example, that you would use on the inside of your reel. This stuff is very sticky. So a lot of times in the comments I'll hear like, man, you put grease on the drag? Like, what are you doing? Like, it's just gonna make it slip and blah, blah, blah. Not this grease. I mean, I guess if you add way too much of it, sure, yeah, it's gonna slip on you, but just a little thin coating just to keep a little lubrication on it. It's a very sticky grease. I call it the peanut butter. That's basically exactly what it feels like. So it's specially made for the drag. Alrighty. Got a little carbon fiber wiping off on my fingers. And now there was a good amount of grease down in here, so I'm just gonna take a little fresh grease on a Q-tip, not a lot. I'm just gonna wipe around the inside of this area here. Just a little bit, just give it a little coating, making sure that I don't leave behind any of the cotton fibers. Just a little bit down in there, nothing crazy. All right, that's it for the drag grease. Let's lay all this stuff back in there and then we can move on. So first was the one drag washer here. Just sit that in there and then I guess we'll use like a screwdriver or some tweezers just to push it down all the way in there. Little black plastic piece. Second drag washer. It just sits in that plastic piece. And then you got a bit of a keyed washer here, and you'll see inside here there's two spaces for that key to fit. So you just want to line that up. It may take you a second. It's tiny in there, especially if you got bigger hands. Push that down. Last drag washer. Just make sure all that's in there nice and flush, stacked on top of each other. And then you got this other metal piece there. All right, so that's ready to rock and roll. And we're just gonna throw this spring clip back in. We're just gonna start on one side and work our way around. And you'll hear it snap into place. You might need to use a screwdriver just to get it to sit all the way in. There it is. You just want to make sure all four sides are pushed in all the way. All right, so this is all good. We'll place this off to the side. There was a little bit of grease up here. I'll just leave that on. Moving on. I guess next up here, we got to take this stuff off, get the bail off. We're going to stick with our tweezers. And it looks like we got 3 washers here. 2 or 3. So I'm just gently putting the tweezers underneath. And I'm just gonna, I might even use my fingers here actually. Yeah, tweezers is the way to go. These things are so tiny, man. I'm just gonna slowly kind of pry up a little bit. All right, there's 2, both the same. Looks like we got 1 more. Come on, baby. And just take your time. These things are kind of thin and dainty, so you don't want to break them or bend them. All right, so it looks like we got 3 little thin washers right there. And now this is odd to me. I haven't seen this really on a reel. So there is a little, what looks to be an Allen screw right on this shaft here, preventing you from taking the rest of this off. So we're going to just take that little attachment, try to find it here. Where is it on this side? Yeah. Very tiny, you can barely see it, but I believe it's a little Allen. Just too big? Yeah. Tiny Allen. Tiny, tiny, tiny. Technically, I think it's that one. It's kind of a pain in the butt because this thing's in your way. But once you find it, you just get that counterclockwise to the left. There it is. How tiny is that thing, man? Ridiculous. So don't lose that. This mat is pretty sick because it has like little magnetic compartments and stuff. So I'm going to take advantage of those. Store that up there for the moment. And now the rest of this should pull right off. And it does. Under here you got a little bit of a spring that sits on this black piece and keeps this white piece from moving, and that can go flying on you very easily as well. So just maybe leave that alone. Just making sure it sits on there pretty good. And that sat right in this little gear here. So we're just gonna leave that all as one piece. And we're just working our way down with all these parts. Looks like there's one more little baby washer there. Went right underneath that. And now we run into our first 2 screws here. Phillips or flathead. I'm gonna go with the flathead because I find that The Phillips head can strip these things out a little bit. Pretty easy. So I'm gonna just go with the flathead. 2 screws here, keeps that cap over the nut. Get those off. Make sure you got a good lock up. There's one. There's 2. That's what's nice about these mats, man. They're rubber, so they don't bounce that much when stuff hits them. Like if it was hitting a harder surface, those things could take off on you real fast, so this mat's cool. All right. So now it looks like there's a little bit of a, I don't know what this part is called, technically. Almost looks like a steering wheel or something like that. But then the little cap sits right on top of it. So the cap, then your little, we'll call it a steering wheel. I'm not really sure what that's called. I'm gonna have to look that up. I'll put it, the name of it, on the screen for you. Next up, looks like we got a little bit of a gasket-ish or washer, something like that. Probably to keep the water out. Looks like it's made of rubber. It's like a seal. Pull that up off. And then we got our nut here, and it looks like there's another washer there too. Yeah, there is. Come on, babe. There it is. A lot of little parts. Just keep them all organized, and you know, that makes your life way easier. All right, next up we got access to the old nut here, and it looks like there is a little writing on here that says unscrew to the right or clockwise. It is a 12mm, I'm guessing. Let's give it a go. I'm just gonna be real gentle, just support the whole reel. Just break it loose and then go back to your fingers, because you can't damage anything with your fingers, you know what I mean? So just use tools like that to get the initial bust loose, and then just switch over to your fingers. Slide that up. Doesn't seem to be any more washers on there. No, it's just one big piece. Alrighty, so we just worked our way down, and then later we just kind of go in reverse. Makes life pretty easy. Let's pull this bail off. Nice and slow, nice and gentle. Looks to be a little bit of a piece in here. Okay, just like a little aluminum piece that sat in there like that. We'll probably leave that in there just so we know. But before we do that, I just want to drop a little bit of oil on this bail system here. Just kind of right on the hinges. Just a tiny little bit. Work that in. You might even be able to put a tiny little bit behind these screws, and it'll work its way in. And then there should be a bearing on this line roller here. And usually what I like to do, if I could find one here, is take a little rubber band and kind of mimic the line rolling over it and work that bearing a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll take a little bit of oil and just drop it right in that area there. And then I'll take a rubber band and just kind of stretch it over my fingers here and kind of run it back and forth on that little line roller, just to kind of mimic that line. Move that bearing around a little bit, get that oil to just drop in there. Now if you're having problems with your bail and stuff, obviously you're going to take all this apart, but this thing's brand new, so I'm not really going to mess with any of that. But if you're just looking to oil it up real fast, just hit those hinges, get this little roller, line roller here, and you're cool. Just going to place that off to the side. Remember, this little piece sits in there like that. And it seems to be magnetic. Just sticking on there, which is cool. Alrighty, next up. Yeah, we probably should have took this handle off, huh? Let's do that. I messed up a little. Had nothing to grab onto. Should have did that first. And you're just turning this thing clockwise. Alrighty. Okay, that stuff pretty much stays on there. There's like a little bit of a seal. It's not so bad. Down here on the handle, gonna just take a drop of oil right where the handle meets the knob. And I'm just gonna work that in a little. Use gravity. Keep it pointed down. Feels good. I'll just place that off to the side as well. All right, next up, let's see here. Looks to me like we got a little bit of another gasket type piece made out of rubber. I'm just gonna slowly pry that up with our fingers. Slide that off. I'm just gonna make a new row. Just keep going down here. All right, so now it looks like we got 3 screws to deal with. They are tiny, tiny, tiny little Phillips heads. Tiny, man. Jeez. Jeez, jeez, jeez. Let's see here. If I can even find one that matches this little baby. Too big? Wow, that's small. Crazy stuff. That should work. Gotta be careful, man. You know, you want that right size. You don't want to strip these things out. I'm still not confident. I don't like that. You only got one shot at these, you know what I mean? You strip them out, you're gonna be ordering new parts. So take your time, find the right attachment. Make sure you got a nice solid lockup. That'll work. There's one. There's 2. And there's 3. We're just going to put those up in this little magnetic area. All right. This little piece should come off now. I'm going to just gently pull straight up. A little bit of a gasket just fell off. Just real slow when you're taking stuff apart. Turn it upside down, see what's going on. This looks like the anti-reverse in there, so I'm just gonna leave that all together. I'm not gonna mess with that. A little bit in the middle here. That can come out, but I'm gonna leave it in and just place it down gently. You don't want that anti-reverse to fall apart on you, man. Here's that little gasket. That's in there to keep the water out, I suppose. Now we got 3 more little screws. Good Lord. And they look a little bigger. So we're gonna need a new attachment. Once again, just take your time, make sure you got the right size. That should fly. I've never seen a reel need so many different attachment tools. It's just wild to me. 1. 2. 3. These are shorter. I'm just going to put them on the, just want to make sure I separate those, so I will, all right, I'll do it like this. I don't even know if you can see this little section up here. I don't think you can. I'm placing all the screws on the top of this mat here. I apologize that you can't see it, but I wanted the camera to be further back so you could see everything I'm doing, even if I pull up here. So, but I'm just separating those into 2 separate piles, and I put the first ones that I took off on the top, and then these that I just took off on the bottom, so I know that's the order they go in, if that makes sense. All right. Now we got some more screws to play with. This is insanity. So it looks like we have one on this side. So if you're holding, I'm gonna hold the reel like this, so it's gonna be backwards. But on this side, you got your first one right on your front left. We're gonna take that off. Seems to be one down there, one there, one there, one there. All right, so there should be like 4 of them. Let's start with this. And go back to flathead. A little big. Jeez. This reel's kind of a pain with the attachments, so bear with me. And you can use a Phillips head here too, obviously. I just kind of like the flathead. All right, so I'm gonna place these in a specific order because they're probably all different sizes. So I'm gonna do it facing me with this handle. And so this one was bottom left. Sorry, you can't see that, but I'm just gonna keep it in that same pattern. Then front right. Oh, there's a little piece I forgot to take off that just moved. Front right. What is this? A little bit of another little gasket type piece. Pull that off. All right, I think we got 1 or 2 more here. I'm gonna take this little cover off the bottom, and that looks like a torque attachment. This is nuts. Nutty. Those are Allen's. Where's my little torque? Small. There we go. It's amazing how many attachments I'm using for this thing. Little baby screw. This should pop off now. And we'll just keep that screw right in there so we know it goes there. That revealed a new screw. And then there's one more torque style on the back here, which looks bigger. Crazy. Craziness. Oh boy, this one's long. Wow, look at that. Completely different than all the other screws. So throw that in the middle. Remember that that's by the handle, that longer black one. And then we got one more down the bottom here. That can be flathead or Phillips. Use a flat. Really nice lockup. All right, and that one is short. All right, cool. So remember those. That was there, and just keep them organized. All right, so there's two that are the same. Here, I'll bring them down for you real fast. These two are the same length, and then you got two longer ones. You can see that. This one was top right. If you're holding the reel like this long black one is back by the handle. This short one was down here in the front. This one right here was in the front right, and this one was back left. Very, very crazy. All different lengths. All right, rock and roll. I think we can pull this thing apart. And we might be able to pull this pinion gear out right now. Slow little twist up. Nice and gentle. Little wiggle. Out comes the pinion gear and your main bearing. Just taking it slow, looking for any washers. There should be two washers down on the bottom of this pinion gear, but I bet you they got stuck. Yeah, they're not on there, so they gotta be down in there. Let's pull this thing apart, nice and gentle. There's this one solid piece back here that continues all the way over to the other side of this, so you just want to be super gentle when you pull this thing apart. You don't want to break that black piece off. Real slow. Just take your time, separate the whole thing. Never seen that before. That's crazy. Just have patience. There you go. See that piece? Connects to both sides, and it's very, very thin and very, very easy to break, I'd imagine. So just take it easy when you're pulling that apart. Take her easy. Yeah, I see those two little washers I was talking about that sat under the pinion. We'll grab those in a second. Here is our main gear. You got a bearing down there covered by a little bit of a plate. We'll deal with that momentarily. And now I suppose the next thing we need to do here is pull out this little pin that keeps this all together, and it's going to come up through the top of the reel. Just like that. And there is a tapered end and a more solid, thicker end. And just remember that the tapered end was facing down. And we're going to pull this shaft out slowly backwards. Nice and slow. And then you got a bearing here inside this little housing. And I believe those little washers I was talking about are attached to it. So we're going to be super slow and careful and just get this thing out of there. Really slow and gentle. Just like that. And then you got those two washers on there, and they are going to sit on this pinion gear. You can see them here. I'll open it up for you a little bit. See those two? They sat on the bottom of this. I knew it, and they got stuck. So you can just put those back on your pinion, or you can leave them off for when you wipe off your pinion gear, either way. All right, let's wipe off these two bearings here, grease or oil them up. This little baby bearing here. I am curious what size this bearing is, because I'm also curious about, I think we're going to run into these little bushings on this side, and I'm wondering if at some point I can upgrade them to bearings to make this thing even smoother. But we're going to look at it in a minute. Wiping off any grease that's on this little bearing here. Wipe off any grease that's on your big main bearing. They were actually oiled pretty well. Just gonna add one drop to them. They don't need much, but just to show you for the sake of the video, take the little bearing. I'm just gonna go one little drop. Work it in. If you've never oiled your bearings before or they seem dry, flip it over, give it one more shot. Work it around on your bearing tester. Same deal on your main bearing. It's an odd size. It doesn't really fit on the tester. Maybe 2 drops on this one. A little bigger. That's your main. So flip it over. 1 or 2 more little drops. Nothing insane, but good little drink. All right. Get that oil all nice and in there. Nice soaked up. Then we got 2 more bearings here. They're both covered by a little obstacle, but we'll get them. This looks pretty good. If you have on your pinion gear any old gross black grease, you want to wipe that off, you can use a Q-tip, toothpick, toothbrush, anything like that. You just want to get that new grease in there, and I'll show you in a minute. But first, let's maybe take care of these bearings. Let's move the shaft out of the way here. Now, on this side, it looks to me like there is a little bit of a plate with three little Phillips head screwdrivers, 3 little Phillips head screws, rather. So we're going to take that off. Now, you don't have to do this, honestly. You can just drop some oil, boom, boom, right in there. But if you want to take it out, make sure there's no grease on it, or you need to replace that bearing, then this plate's got to come off. There's 1 little screw. Two. You know, screw it, I'll take the whole thing off. 3, and the little plate. And that exposes that bearing. We're gonna take our little bearing remover. It's basically just a little hook. Get in there, scoop it out gently. And it looks like there are some washers back in there. Is there 1 or 2? 2. 2 paper thin washers on the back side of that bearing. Just going to put those back where they came from. Just nice and gentle. Sit them all the way down in there. Just be aware that they're there. And we're just gonna clean off this bearing a little bit. Check for any grease. Doesn't look like there is any. We're just gonna give it a little drink. Working around a bit. Cool. Let's place that back where it came from. I'm just going to make sure to sit that all the way down. So it's nice and flush. And then we can put our little cover back on. Now these screws might be a little bit of a problem because they're so tiny. But let's see. Just put our little cover on, line up the screw holes. Okay, these screws are too small, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use a little trick here. They're not magnetic. This thing is magnetic, this material isn't, so I'm just gonna take a tiny little bit of grease on my screwdriver here, and that should form a little stickiness for you so you can get this screw back to where it goes. Going backwards and then forwards helps with these little screws, by the way, just to get them going. It's a cool little trick, right? With the grease. Makes life easier. All right, rock and roll. I'm just going to take a little bit of a Q-tip, wipe off that grease that I left on those screws. That works well. All right, this part's all ready to rock and roll. Now we got this side to deal with. If you want to get at that bearing, this whole thing is going to need to come out and out of your way. So to do that, seems to be a screw down the bottom here. Looks like to be decent sized flathead. Getting a little slippery here, folks. See it right there. Nice little hook up, lock up rather. Pull that out. And it looks like there is a little plate. Now this, in theory, should get pushed out. Looks like there's a little bushing there. This little worm gear comes flying out. All right, on the bottom of this thing, there seemed to be a tiny little washer or two and this white little bushing. I don't know if there's one or two washers. There's two. Damn, they're small. That's wild, dude. I'm just gonna place that down. Look at those. Tiny, man, tiny. Just place those on there like that. Get this worm gear out. Right on. Then back behind that, there are these two little black gears. Flat side of it was facing up, and then there's a little more of an indentation, like, or actually protrusion, like a little piece like pointing out that was facing down, so you want to remember that. And then on the inside of that, you have another one of these little white bushings. But I may just leave that in there. You'll see how hard that is to come out. Yeah, that's difficult, man. That's tough to come out. I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to get that out of there. Got it. A little bearing remover for the win. That little thing. All right, so that one went on the top. Now, if you really want to get cute with this reel, these two little white bushings, you might be able to get bearings that fit that size. I don't know what size they are, but yeah, I don't even think I have like a little chart here for bearings, and I don't see that size on here at all. That is just ridiculously small. This one maybe. But yeah, you'd have to special order some crazy little bearings for that. That's nutty. But I'm sure they're out there somewhere. And that'll make your reel slightly, you know, the tiniest bit heavier, but could actually make it pretty sick. I don't even know where you would get those. I have to look into that. I'm just gonna wipe out any loose grease that's rolling around this area here. And then you got another little pin that sits in there and holds another little set of gears. I'm just gonna leave that alone. There's really no need to pull that out. Now we have access to the bearing here. I'm just gonna scoop it out. Gonna be mindful of any other washers that are on there. I don't see any. A lot of little parts, man. You hanging in there with me? If you're enjoying this right now and this is helping you out, do me a favor and drop a like on the video. Kind of helps the channel out, you know what I'm saying? Appreciate it. Appreciate you guys even watching. Hope you're into this stuff. Winter time, so now's the time to do this stuff, you know what I mean? All right, let's get a little oil on this bearing here. This dude. I don't think that exhaust sounds very good. Do you? All right, let's get this thing back in. Now I'm just gonna push this bearing back in. You're probably gonna hear it snap. There it is. Get that sitting nice and flush in there. And then we can just kind of grease up some of this stuff and get it back together. We're pretty much bare bones right now. Looking pretty good. Where's my paintbrush, sir? All right. Just kind of cleaning up any old grease that was in there. All right, let's see here. What we got to do first. All the bearings are taken care of. We hit that one, we hit that one, we hit that one, we hit that one. We hit those in there as best we could. And now we're just gonna kind of move on to the grease aspect of it. We're gonna get some on our pinion gear here. Nothing insane, but we're just gonna get inside these teeth here. Nothing crazy, just a little coating. I see a little bit of fiber from the Q-tip-ish stuff. Get that off. Nice clean coating. We're going to do the same with our main gear. Right on these teeth. Not too much, just a little bit. Just work your way through those teeth. Very cool. All right, looking pretty good. Nice. Hit our worm gear here a little bit. There's a little bit on there left already, so nothing too crazy. Just get in those teeth. You know, part of me wants to just go with oil here, just to make it a little lighter. Not quite sure if I want to do that or not. Usually on a worm gear, I like oil on my bait casting reels, but this reel is a little different, being a spinning reel, so maybe I will just go with a little grease here. Very light. Grease is just, it just has like a little bit of a heavier feel to it, you know? Just gonna take a little and hit this little gear area here. All right, let's get this thing back in. We're going to take a little also on this little slide pin. Just a tiny little bit of a coating, nothing crazy. Just because that has to slide up and down on it. And then possibly a little bit of a tiny little bit of a coating on this shaft here. Very light. A little bit on the back side here, a little bit on this little hole where that pin's going to go back and forth on. Very light. Okay. And we can start firing this thing back together. First things first, we got to put this little bushing back up in there. And I don't know, I guess we could do a little bit of, tiny little bit of grease around this, just very, very light. It'll just help stick that in there. See if I can get this thing in, it's so tiny. Wow, this might be a little bit of a problem here, ladies and gentlemen. This thing is beyond small. Sorry if you got a bad angle here, but I'm basically just gonna try to lay that in there. Can I do it? Yeah, got it. Good Lord. That is just so tiny. All right, now we got this little piece here, little gear piece. Take a tiny, 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 tiny little bit of grease and just give it a little coating. Nothing crazy. And remember that flat side was facing up. So we're just gonna lay that in there. Oops. You can see that. I'm just gonna try to keep it pressed up there, lined up against that other gear. And then we're just gonna slide this worm back down through here. And sit it, that shaft, right into the black piece and then into the white bushing. I'm just gonna take her time, push it in so it sits flush. Might need just a little bit of a turn here and there. It's giving me a little bit of a problem. I believe this thing is keyed. There it is, right there. I just rotated it a little bit until the keyed end of this worm gear fit into that little black gear. You want that thing sitting all the way in there, nice and flush. Now next up, this is going to be a little bit of a project too. We have these two tiny little baby washers and then this other white bushing. So I'm just going to be super, super gentle. And you know, I might just separate these and get them on there with the Q-tip, I'm sorry, with the tweezers. You guys hanging? Hanging in? This is a little nuts. A little nuts. So, let's see if we can get these to lay in there around that worm gear. It is precision, my friends. Don't breathe. Oof. Come on, baby. Here it is. Ooh, it's like defusing a bomb. So you got those two washers in there, then we can lay in this other little bushing, which I really, 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 really am considering trying to find a bearing for that. That would be really sick. But we're just gonna lay that in there. And sit it flush. Just like that. You heard it pop in, I'm sure. And that's ready to rock and roll. Man, it's just so crazy how tiny this thing is, man. It's like hurting my eyes. Just want to make sure those screws are all tight and good. This screw right here, if this thing gets loose, it can cause wobble in your reel. So before you go throwing that back in, just it's usually tight. It's usually got Loctite on it. I just want to make sure, it's too big. I just want to make sure that it's on there tight. Yeah, it is. Just checking, just checking. All right. Greased, 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 all good. A little bit of grease down in here. These two gears are lining up nice. What's that sound? Just tiniest, tiniest, tiniest bit more grease on these gears. Nice little coating. I'm taking my time with this thing, man, because it's very delicate and it's very tricky. So you can always use that speed up button on the playback if you're getting bored or you're trying to fast forward around, but I'm doing this in real time, kids, so hang in there. We're getting there. All right, let's see. Next up, We're going to slide this. Actually, we need to get this little plate on here first. That slips right over that. Line up the hole. Push it down. Get that screw to sit in there. Come on. Tricky little sucker, that one. Come on. Just trying to line it up so it goes in nice and straight, you know? There it is. A lot of patience involved in this, you know what I mean? A lot of patience. All right, next up, that worm gear is all in there nicely. So let's get this shaft back in there. But I guess first we need to drop this little bearing in. I'm gonna need the tweezers because it is tiny. Just gonna kind of place it over that area and just let it fall in. And I might be able to just go through the top here and just guide it. You can see that. I'll just sit it right down in that area there. And remember, it had those two washers, but we put them on the pinion gear, so when we put that in, they'll go right back into place where they should be. Now let's slide this shaft up in here. Really gentle. Totally different setup, this spinning reel too. Usually the way this shaft connects to the oscillating slide and all that is completely different, which is nuts. But this one just sits right in that worm gear, which is crazy, man. That little bearing kind of popped out, so we're just gonna push that back in. And then we're gonna take our slide piece, little pin there, and then just remember there's a tapered end and that was going down. So we're just gonna stick it through this hole here on the side, run it down, get it through that shaft, and make it sit all the way flush. And now that shaft is locked into place, so we're cool. Next up, we have our main gear. We're just going to sit that right in. Just a little rotation. Get it to sit. And then we can throw in our pinion gear and our main bearing. Don't forget about those two little washers. Don't let them fall off. They're sitting on the bottom. There you go. Now we're going to slide this right down over the shaft and down into that little baby bearing. We're just going to do like a slow twist. Try to get it to sit in there. Just like that. Make sure this bearing is pushed flush all the way down. Just like that. And we're off to the races here. That's catching that gear. That's catching the worm gear. Bringing the shaft up and down correctly. Everything seems to be working and in the right place. We're looking good. Whew. All right, you're getting there, man. Let's slap this thing back together. Slap this thing back together and go have ourselves a nice cup of coffee. All right, let's get this case back on. Just double check here real fast before we go and put this thing back on. What did we do? We did all the bearings on the inside. We greased everything. Worm gear, pinion gear, main gear, that slide, those little gears in there we hooked up. Got to both of those bearings that were hidden. Got that little baby bearing, main bearing. Just double check, look around, make sure you did everything that you need to do and everything's in the right place and everything's working well together. And it is. So let's get this thing back on. Pretty cool. Now we're just going to gently get this case back on and be mindful of this little black piece, which does come off, I think. But I'm not going to mess with it. Nice and gentle. Just work your way around the reel. There it is. Just add pressure. How does that little black piece even come off? It like slides. It's crazy though. You gotta be careful. Alright, we're good. Everything seems to be fit together perfect. Seamless. No gaps anywhere. Just double check, you know, make sure it's all together right. Alright, we're ready to rock and roll here. Let's get some of these screws back in. I guess I'll start with this long black handle piece here. Just to get that out of the way. And that was a Torque, if I remember correctly. Okay, tight as tight. We're going to take this little one, get it down over here. And this one, I'm just going to use a flathead. That'll work. Starting to slip on me a little bit because my hands are so greasy. All right, tight as tight. Now we had one up here on the front right. Come on. I'm just keeping pressure on everything, you know? Nice lock up. Tight as tight. And last one was on the back left of me. Get that in there. Wow, all these screws are so different, man. It's just insanity. Trying to keep all my tools all my bits organized. It's just crazy how many I'm using on this. All right, cool. Now we got this little cover. We're gonna throw that on. Make sure that's sitting nice. We got another little torque screw, I believe. Little baby torque screw. Got it. All right, that was a pain in the butt. All right, man, we are just about ready to rock and roll on this thing. Get this top piece back on and we're ready. We are ready. Let's get this little piece here lined up with the screw holes. Just gonna line that up with the screw holes just like that. You know what? This might be upside down. There it is. Just want to make sure all those screws are lined up. And now they were the really tiny short ones that went here. Really stubby, short, and a tiny, tiny, tiny little Phillips. A little more grease trick. Let's get these bad boys in. Backwards and then forwards. Tight as tight. A little grease. What you got going on out there? A little garbage pickup? All right, we're good. Cool. Next up, what are these screws? Probably the same. Can I use the same attachment or no? Are these even smaller? No, I can. We're good. All right, next up, we got our little gasket piece here. We're just gonna slide that down and we're gonna place it, get this little piece of hair off here. Place it right over that round area so it sits nice and flush. Just kind of press it down, work your way around, just sit it, just like that. So it just sits nice and seamless. Then we have the little anti-reverse. And this middle piece is liable to come popping out on us, but we'll try our best. There it is. Did I call that or what? Now this, we just have to make sure there are two, let me set this thing back in here. There are two little pegs on the bottom of this thing, and then you got your screw holes that you need to line up. So just kind of take a look at it, figure out where those pegs are, and where it's going to fit into place, and where those screws are going to line up with, and just kind of work your way down and try to aim for that. And there should be a very obvious feel to this thing locked up, and I think I hit it right there. What is going on out there? Garbage day. We're gonna sit this piece, make sure that's all the way down in there, that little tube that comes out, that I guess it would be a roller clutch inner tube, equivalent to a bait caster. And that sits on there nice, right in those little pegs there, fit perfect. And then you got these screws on the outside, these 3 little screws. And you really got to make sure that thing's on there flush, man, because this thing ain't gonna work right if it's not. You know what I mean? Know what I'm saying? Backwards and forwards. Beautiful. God, my eyes hurt from how tiny these screws are, I swear. This whole reel is just like insanely small. That's why it's so light. Like a magnifying glass for some of these little parts. All right. We be cool, man. What are we, about 4 hours in? Jesus. Spinning reels are just so much more complicated and finicky. It's really nuts. All right, we got this little piece here. I'm just gonna throw a little bit of grease on, just so it doesn't dry out on us. Nothing crazy, but just a nice little coating. It's just rubber, you know? If it dries out, it's just gonna break, so I'm just gonna keep a nice little coating on it. All right, good enough. I'm just gonna slide this down. I'm just gonna work it over the ends. Make sure it's all snapped on and flush. Just gonna take off any sloppiness that's going on there. That's cool. May just give the tiniest, I'm not even putting any, I'm not even dipping, I'm just taking what was left on the brush here, and I'm just gonna go around this little area, just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, right where everything kind of screws on, and just keep a little bit of moisture on that, because there was grease on it when I took it off, so just want to make sure that it's got a little bit of love. All right. Really just painting it so it like changes the color to like a darker black, if that makes sense. It's not, I'm not like putting like a blue grease coating on it. It's just kind of adding a little moisture to it. Man, we are almost there. We are almost there. All right. What do we got now? Next up, we can throw this back on, I believe, our bail. Just checking around, just making sure, but we're good. We already oiled up the hinges of this thing and the line roller. So we're gonna throw this thing back on. Remember that piece sits underneath it there, but it seems to like to stick to it, so that makes life easy. Just gonna slowly sit this down. Very nice. We got our nut. There was a flat side pointing up and the more rounded side that sat down into this area, and it's gonna screw into the left counterclockwise. Just nice and gentle until it tightens up. Then we're going to get our 12mm wrench, and we're just going to give it 1 or 2 turns supporting the side of the reel here. Nothing crazy, man. You don't know your own strength sometimes with this stuff. I'm actually scared that I over-tightened it a little bit. Barely enough. You don't want to push it too hard. These parts are very, very, very delicate. All right, we're cool. Next up, we got that tiny little washer here. Throw that down, sit it in there. And we got that little red, orange-ish type of gasket piece. Sit that on like that. Then you got your big steering wheel. Not really sure what it's really called there, but get that on. Then you got your little cap. That's going to come down right over those screw holes and on your nut. And it's going to take a little bit of finagling here because that pattern on the underside of that needs to match up. You see what I mean? On the underneath here, see that pattern shaped like the nut? So if it's not sitting on the perfect area of that, it won't line up. And you know, that might have something to do with the tightness of this nut too, like on a bait casting reel. See how it's off just by a tiny little bit? So that tells me I need to tighten that nut just a little bit. When I went back and I loosened it a little because I thought I over tightened it, I need to go back and push it just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit more. God, my hands are so greasy. So that way those screw holes line up with it. That's it right there. Very tiny. Now in theory, this should line up way better. And it does. See how those are just perfect dead on now on those screw holes? That's what you need to do. And that tells you, you know, whether you over tightened or you need to tighten up that nut some more. Just like on a bait caster, I do it all the time. All right, we got these two little black screws here. They are little baby Phillips heads. Time consuming, man. God, it's frustrating. All right, I am gonna use a Phillips just to get this thing started. It might help me stick. I'm just sitting them on here with this Phillips head, just so I can stick it with these with this grease. That flathead, just don't do it. Then I'll go back in there and make sure they're properly tightened with the flathead. Very delicate, don't over tighten them, just like all this other stuff. We're just about there. All right, got this little washer, send that down. Got this piece that all was together. You can separate it if you want, just be careful. Remember that little spring is in there. It is no fun if you lose it. Sit that on there. Sit that down. Now we need our little Allen. Where we at? Where's my little baby Allen? Don't drop it. That'll work. And just make sure everything's looking nice and flush on this piece here. And we're just going to take that little Allen, get it back into that shaft. And I'm just going to stop when I feel light pressure. I'm not over tightening at all. Now this little piece here doesn't look exactly straight to me, so I just want to make sure that's all good. It's got a little bit. There we go. I think the weight of the spool kind of straightens it out. And then you got these 3 little washers here. I'm gonna get those on. Sit that down. Just gonna need a little bit of finagling. They're a little bit of a tight fit. You might be better off doing one at a time, honestly. I'm just kind of working around with your fingers until you find it. There it is. Sit that all the way down. Next one. God, this reel is just so precise and delicate. It's just unbelievable. Come on. Number 2. Come on, baby. There it is. I'm just gonna take the tweezers, boom, all the way down. It's pretty much game over right there, kids. Spool back on. Let me put the tiniest, nah, we're cool. We're cool up there. Spool. Drag back on. Drag cap anyway. And get our handle back in. Now I suppose we could take the tiniest little grease and just hit these threads, but barely any. Barely any. It's actually too much for my liking. I got too much on my brush here. It's a tiny little coating. I'm not even leaving any excess on at all. Get this reel on. Let's get this handle on. Nice. I'm just gonna support it, tighten up a little bit on that handle, and we are off to the races. It is game over. Wow. This reel is very time consuming, man. Very time consuming, very precise, very delicate. No wonder this thing weighs 6.3 ounces. That is just insanity. Feels amazing already. And usually when you first do this, it kind of sounds like crap for a little while and doesn't feel very smooth. And it takes you know, some time to get everything to work in. And about 20-30 seconds to a minute later, all of a sudden you feel this release happen in a reel, whether it's a bait caster or a spinning reel, and all of a sudden it's just like, whoa, you feel this difference of it getting so smooth. So just take it over to the couch, play with it, work in all that oil and grease. Feels good, feels real good. So there you have it, man. That is the Shimano Vanford C3000XG. Very cool reel, man. Very time consuming. So if you hung in for this whole video, I applaud you. Very time consuming, very delicate, a lot of tiny parts. You know, you really got to take your time and make sure everything is going back in the exact right place, or this thing's just not going to work right for you. So, you know, it's one of the more complicated reels I've ever worked on. I'm not going to lie to you. Bait casters are way less finicky. I mean, it's just these parts, man, blew my mind. That's why this thing weighs 6 ounces, 6.3 ounces. It's just everything is so tiny and light on it. So it's pretty wild. But yeah, man, I think we did a good job. I think everything feels amazing. Super, super smooth. It's going to take a little time to work in all that fresh oil and grease for sure. I'll probably take it over to the couch, work it in a little bit. But yeah, man, very cool reel. I can't wait to try this thing out. Yeah, feels good, dude. Everything sounds and works good. Feels really smooth. I'm happy with it, dude. I can't wait to try this thing out. So there you go, man. Hope this video helped you out. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up in the comments. I'll do my very best to answer them to the best of my knowledge. And yeah, dude, another reel in the books. Shimano Vanford. What a sick, sick reel. How they put these things together, man. It just absolutely blows my mind. Really crazy. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. And if you're into this sort of thing, don't forget to hit subscribe. We put a new video out every single week. And definitely check out our Shimano Reels playlist. I have a big collection of Shimano Reels. I'm always taking them apart and messing with them, so odds are you're gonna find a few more reels that maybe you're looking to take apart yourself, and I hope those videos help you out as well. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Later. What a cool reel, man. Whew. This thing is really, really nuts. If you want to see more videos just like this one, be sure to check out the rest of the Where We Wild YouTube channel, where we post a brand new video every week. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you get notified whenever we post a new adventure. Thanks for watching. See ya.